The brand new head came yesterday for this 300 TDI job, and it looks quite nice, and I got one with valves in because for the difference in price you might as well have them all fitted and new springs and new parts, and you know, you could reuse the old ones, but time's money, eh? So what I've done is I've swapped all the studs over from the old head, and bearing in mind that this is a Defender, so this little stud here goes at the bottom and in Discovery it goes in at the top. What else is, yeah, your injector clamp bolts, just double nut those together with the two nuts, clamp them together, and then they'll come out and you can swap them over. These pins here sometimes can be a bugger. They do come out, but for the price of them, you know, for a few pennies, just get new ones and bang them in. Well, like I say, I'm doing this as a job to make some money, and you know, I've just spent 20 minutes trying to get them out because they were absolute nightmares to get out. I don't know why. So anyway, now let's go and have a look at the block, and we'll take the head gasket and I'll show you what I was trying to talk about, those heads. In fact, I tell you what, let's turn these two heads over and see what the difference is. This is the head that came off, and I know it's rusty because it's been in the water bath, and you know, to see where it was leaking. But let's observe, this head was supposed to be the modified head with the advanced cooling. This is where it was got another couple of holes. But if you look on this head, I just got the ordinary one for the simple reason, you get the gasket out. Hang on, which way does it go? There is no hole on here for it. Same as here, look, you see there's no hole. Those are there, but there's no hole, so there's no point. Let's go and have a look at the head, the block, and we'll tell you a few notes about that too. So I've cleaned up the block and examined everything. Everything seems to be quite nice. There are a few little marks still in here, but it just stains more than anything. But again, you can see here there's no hole in the head. Strange that, isn't it? So it's had a gasket in with the holes in before, but not there. Now, a couple of things to notice. You must make sure that these dowels are in place, alright? Sometimes they stay in the head, sometimes they stay in the block, but you must make sure those are in. Those are the location dowels. And the next thing you're going to do is you're going to sort of get some paper towel or whatever you can get and block over those push rod lifters and blow out the threads on all the bolt holes. You will be surprised how much water and oil can get down in there, even though we've drained the block off. Now, talking of the block, if you remember this video that I've put a link in up here, that the bung, the drain bung, snapped off. Let me see if I can get a light down there. Down there, look, you see the drain bung snapped off. Well, I thought I'd get that out with an easy out. Nope, it won't come out. So I usually do, when I do cylinder heads, I leave this manifold on and just pull it back out the way. There's no real need to take it all off. But in this instance, I'm going to have to take all this lot off to get in to try and get the remains of that stud out, because I might have to drill it out and drill and tap it. I don't know. This easy out here just chews everything up, so a bit disappointed in that. So the next stage, as I say, blow all the bolt holes out, clean it up, and then we're just going to drop the head on loose with the gasket, and then we're going to put some bolts in. I just wanted to say that I just blew out those bolt holes. Now, I did drain the block out before, but because this is where the oil passage comes through, this one here was almost half full of oil. Now, if you hadn't blown it out, what can happen is when you tighten out the bolt, when the bolt goes down and tightens into that hole, you can hydraulically fracture the block, and then you're screwed. That's it, game over. We're not talking about helicoils anymore. The power of compressed oil is absolutely amazing, and by tightening that bolt down, if there's any oil or liquid in there, it's going to crack. it won't strip. Believe me, it'll crack the block first. It'll take the easiest route out. And you can see, look, I've got oil everywhere. If you're wondering how I cleaned up the head, I used my orbital sander with WD-40 and cleaned out all the orifices and kept it wet, kept the orbital sander wet. And the reason for that was that it's not going to take any metal off, because I use an 800 paper, but it's going to stick to the paper, and then it's an easy clean off. So I just wanted to point that out about hydraulicking and cleaning them bolt holes out, because those stud holes, it's really, really important, and it's something that people sometimes overlook. If you haven't got an airline, just use some paper and roll it up into like a bud and push it in like a tube and push it down and trying to absorb anything. Believe me, I've seen it done before. So I've just dropped on the head gasket a couple of little notes. Again, make sure the dowel's in, because that holds it in place. The next thing is just to make sure that you've got top on here and the 3 holes point towards the back of the engine. It is possible to flip these upside down, believe it or not, and then you're into all sorts of trouble. So just pay attention to that. There is no gasket sealer required of any type on here, spray or grease or nothing. The black finish is the gasket sealer, so I just wanted to point that out to you. Alright? It's advisable to fit the thermostat housing to the head before you fit the head to the block. The reason for it is some of these bolts at the bottom are notoriously difficult to get at, and this casting is on a little slot, so all you have to do really is back these off to get the bolt in, but to drop the housing on, and then you can put the 2 top bolts in quite easy. But it's really fiddly to get these bottom ones, so just be aware of that. Now, this head that I took when I took it off this old head didn't have a gasket on it. All they'd done is gobbled it up with the silicone, which I don't like. So I put the gasket back on, and I've put some high-low sill on it, so that's going to be nice. And I also put brand new bolts in there with a little bit of the thread guard on, so that if it ever has to come off again, somebody's going to thank me for it. Right, let's go and fit this head. So I've dropped the head into place and made sure that the dowels are located at the front and the back. Now I've also, because these are brand new bolts and they're quite dry, I have put a little bit of oil on the threads using the oil can here, and they just drop in the holes. And then we're going to nip them down. I'll do the tightening sequence probably later. But one thing to notice, when you're doing the Defender, don't forget to put the bracket on for the air cleaner. The Discovery doesn't have that. And also put the bolt in on the stay first, because otherwise it might not line up. So that's one little thing to notice. Another thing, which is quite a simple rookie mistake to make, and I have seen it done before, is that this manifold is taped off to protect it from dirt and dust. And I have known people leave that piece of tape on. I know it happens to us all, but you know, you don't want to do a job twice. Now, as I was saying just previously, those are the bolts to get the thermostat housing on, and you can see they're quite tricky, and the other side is well, nigh on impossible. So put the thermostat on first. So now I'm just going to run those down, and I'm just going to simply use, you know, I'm not going to torque these down, but I'm just going to run them down like this. Yeah? They're not going to be torqued down in any sequence. It's just a lazy way of pulling bolts down. All right, so I'm going to get on with that, and then we'll see about tightening this head up. To tighten down the head, the gasket comes with a little pattern here, and it tells you the instructions how to tighten this down. Now, first of all, there's the pattern. That's easy. Now what we're going to do is write on the bolts the numbers corresponding to that pattern. Generally speaking, this is the front, but it doesn't sort of really matter which way around it is, because as long as you keep that pattern, it's always going to be the same, front or back. This is important too. 40 Newton meters. So the first stage, you tighten the head down to 40 Newton meters. Now this is a generic piece of paper from the Wright's company, and this set of instructions are for a 200 TDI, and this set of instructions are for a 300 TDI. Both you tighten down to 40 Newton meters with your regular cliquette type ratchet. You know, we've probably got one of these or something similar. Right, so 40 Newton meters. The next stage, you need an angle gauge to turn the bolts 60 degrees in the same pattern. Alright? So, how do we do that? How do we do an angle gauge? Well, this is if you're just doing a one-off job, you can buy one of these little things here. And this is my first one. And it's completely knackered because I accidentally spilled some thinners on it and melted the plastic. I could really take it to bits and polish it up and make it nice again, but I don't use this one anymore. I'll show you in a minute what I'm going to use. But the principle is exactly the same. You put your socket on this bit and your drive bar on here. And now if I'm representing the bolt, I'm tightening down. As you tighten this down, wait a minute, as you tightening the bolt down, you will see the gauge move. There's 0. I hope you can see it, but there's 0. And I took this to bits before and I put a red mark on 60. And then you stop. And then you reset this and then you go around all the rest of them. And the idea is that this bar here hits somewhere in your cylinder head and stops this from turning, because if not, it would all turn. Well, the bad side about this is it's all in damn plastic. And even though this part is knurled, you'll still get one or two bolts that it'll actually kick round, especially when you're getting on to the third stage, and you can lose your settings, and that's not very good. Because you see, on a 300 TDI, which is the one we're going to do here, we have to do 40 Newton meters, 60 degrees, and then 20 degrees on the M12 bolts. Now the M12 bolts, if we have a quick look over here, where's the engine gun? That's it. Everything's backwards on this camera. These bolts here are not M12, alright? These, the big ones, the big thick bolts, they're the M12s, and those are the ones you've got to go around 3 times, alright? So, what do I use? Well, let's have a look. I'll have to tip the camera down because you won't see this. I bought this thing. This is what is it? Laser Tools. That's right. That's the thing that I use, laser. And it's really good. I mean, it'll do all sorts of bits and pieces, but the nice thing is it's got a memory in it, so you don't have to, you set your settings once and that's it. So I use the regular ratchet to do the 40 Newton meters, but I use this to do my 60 degrees. So if we turn it on, I can't tip it too much. So first of all, it's coming up to pounds-feet. So we're going to change it to angle, and it'll calculate the angle. So there it knows it's 0. So if I turn this very slowly, you can see the numbers creeping up. 40, and you have to be very careful, but this has got a little trick in it. It bleeps when it gets up to where you want to be. And when you're on 60, it stops. How cool is that? Eh? It saves hours and hours and hours and hours of frustration. So, you know, you can just ponk it on, tighten it down, shut up you. No, that's not quite right. But anyway, you get the idea. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to mark up the head bolts on here, and we're going to torque them down. Now, again, I've just shown you a demonstration of that. I don't really think there's much point of showing you how to tighten the head down. I probably will do, but well, we'll see how it goes. But it's very simple. You might be able to even rent one of these little tools here. I don't know. But because I do quite a few cylinder heads, this thing has paid for itself 5 or 6 times now. So if you're going to do a one-off, one of these will do, but I tell you what, as a tipette, get your mate to hold this, get a friend of yours to hold it rigid instead of relying on this, because if you move your setting, if you lose your settings, you'll probably have to start again. That's a bummer, isn't it? After a bit of a battle with an easy out, I give up with those. These are rubbish. I couldn't get the bung out. You know, I said earlier that the drain bung had snapped off in the block. Well, actually, how I ended up getting it out was using a Torx bit, because there seems to be that's all they're ever good for. And I managed to get the stub end out, and it came out quite freely. But this was just nice to push through the bit of brass that was there and cut the teeth in so it could unscrew. So that's one good thing. An even better thing is the new bung is a solid bung. I don't know why. Do you know something? That's a nice step, but why didn't they just put a tap in it? You know, that would be so much easier, because it's a real nightmare to get into that. Anyway, the bung here is ERC 9410, blue box one and a solid one. So that's a first from Britparts, something of quality. So now I'm going to put that back in, and we're going to start to do the head bolts. So I've gone round the head in the specified order with the torque wrench on a ratchet to 40 Newton meters, but I noticed something on this sheet here. They've actually put 2 6s here. I don't know if you can see that. So this one should be a 5. Now the thing what we do next, we can get that engine, perhaps I'll move the camera a bit closer. Can we see it now? I can't get this any higher, unfortunately. But I've got my white marker pen. I'll tell you something, these were cheap. I'll tell you a little story about these. These are Milwaukee white markers. Write on anything. This was $4, this pen. Milwaukee, good make. The guy drove all the way across town, my delivery man, to deliver a $4 pen. Can you believe it? There's nobody made any money on that whatsoever. So what I'm going to do, first of all the bolts where they're going to be, I'm going to put a dab of white paint right at the front like that. Okay? Always pointing towards the front of the engine. Right? I don't know if you can see that, but I'll probably show you in a minute. I'll do all the rest like that. Now the reason for that is, even if we draw the numbers on which I'm going to do next, I'm going to write all the numbers on the bolts, because it makes tightening them down really fast. But if you've missed one, sometimes it's quite tricky to find out where you've been. You know, so you'll see the dot on the bolt, and you'll see it turn, and all of them should be in the same position. Now if you've inadvertently missed one, because there is 18 bolts to tighten, is it 18? Yeah, there's 18 to tighten down, so you can miss them. So I'm going to mark them up, and then we're going to start with the laser angle gauge. I'll probably pick this back up towards the end, because you've seen how it works, and there's no point doing things twice. So there you go. That's the head down to 40 Newton meters, and then I've painted them up, and I've put a little dab of paint on the front. I'll just move the camera so you could see it a little bit better. So now we're going to use this angle gauge in here to tighten up the head. Like I said, this is a bit boring, so I'll just maybe do one, and then we'll do all the rest off camera.